From tumors that can grow teeth to creeping in on live webcams, today we'll look at some more creepy facts. This photo is very haunting and it's real. On February 20th, 1970, a 14-year-old Australian teen named Keith Sapsford snuck into the Sydney airport and hid in the wheel well of a plane heading to Japan. Keith was described as a curious kid, and this may have been his attempt at an adventure. However, soon after the plane took off, tragedy struck, and Keith's 200-foot drop was accidentally documented by John Gilpin, an amateur photographer who happened to be testing his new camera lens at the time and took this haunting photo. I wonder if he knew what he was capturing, or if he had to wait until the photos were developed and then saw it for the first time. This is an X-ray showing around 30 nails piercing a skull. It's been released by Australian police, vividly revealing the gruesome death of a 27-year-old man. Police released the shocking picture in the hope of finding the killer, who used a high-powered nail gun to fire the metal spikes up to 85 millimeters long into the victim's head. Two children aged 9 and 14 found the victim as they canoed down Georges River in South Sydney. As they paddled past mangroves at dusk on November 1st, they spotted a badly decomposed body wrapped in a rug and raced to tell their parents. Mr. Liu, who had been dead for 12 days, was bound with electrical wires and an extension cord, and then rolled in a domestic rug with the ends neatly tucked in, which was then tied with 3 pieces of wire. The head of the homicide squad said, "In 36 years of investigation, I've never come across a murder of this nature using a nail gun. May I say it's a particularly brutal and vicious murder, and we are seeking information from the public so we can bring this inquiry to a conclusion." Police believe Mr. Liu was killed, then driven to the river in his own 2005 Range Rover, but no arrests have been made, and the weapon is yet to be found. 2 weeks before the children discovered Mr. Liu's body, a male friend reported him missing. A teratoma is a rare type of germ cell tumor that can contain fully formed tissue, teeth, hair, bone, and muscle. Germ cells are the only things in your body that can turn into basically anything. So when a tumor starts in your germ cells, it can become any type of tissue. There's even the possibility of it including eyes. They can be found in men and women, but the cause of most teratomas is not yet completely understood. They're often associated with a number of inherited defects that affect the central nervous system, the genitourinary tract, and the lower spine. Trypophobia is the fear of holes. People with trypophobia may express feelings of disgust or fear, as well as strong unease when encountering stimuli containing irregular patterns or clusters of holes. But don't worry, this picture is just a fake. It's a really simple makeup trick that you can do with modeling wax, even though it does look like an empty maggot infestation. Even though I don't have this phobia, I'll say that these pictures do make me a little uneasy. They feel weird. There isn't that much research published that explains why we feel this way, but apparently it's because it reminds us of disease and small insects or parasites, which we often associate with danger. This is a photo made by Kurt Diemberger, an Austrian mountain climber. It seems normal at first until you look at where the paths in the snow fork off. One leads to where the camera is set up, and the other off the cliff. This picture was taken right after Kurt's companion Hermann Buhl fell into the abyss on the Himalayan mountain Chogalisa. Buhl was walking only shortly behind Diemberger, and for only a brief moment left the trail, after which he fell through an overhanging cornice. He still remains in the ice. This is another picture that seems very innocent. One of the Beatles, John Lennon, signs an autograph for an eager fan, but the man he's giving his signature to will be his killer, Mark Chapman. Even more unsettling, this was captured just a few hours before the murder. After signing and taking the photo, Lennon reportedly asked the man if he wanted anything else. Chapman allegedly started planning to kill Lennon 3 months prior. Initially, he was a longtime fan of Lennon's former band, much like everyone at the time, but Chapman turned strongly against him due to a religious conversion and Lennon's highly publicized 1966 remark about the Beatles being more influential than Jesus. Space has always freaked me out. It's dark, you're alone, and you're so far away from home. Here we see just a couple of astronauts posing in zero gravity, right? It's pretty rare to get a photo opportunity like this one, so you might as well take it. But what they don't know is that their space shuttle is irreparably damaged, and all of them will be dead in a few days during re-entry. This is the crew of the Columbia Space Shuttle. On Saturday, February 1st, 2003, it disintegrated as it re-entered the atmosphere over Texas and Louisiana, killing everyone on board. It was the second space shuttle mission to end in disaster after the loss of Challenger in 1986. So the shuttle is covered in many tiles all over, which are supposed to act as a thermal shield since the air resistance is so strong when re-entering the atmosphere. But a few of these tiles were damaged during the launch of the shuttle. However, no one really knew how bad the damage was until disaster struck. This surveillance camera shows the 2-year-old James Bolger in a shopping mall February 12, 1993 near Liverpool, England. Bolger holds the hand of one of two 10-year-old boys later convicted of his murder. The two 10-year-old boys subjected James to severe mistreatment before tragically ending his life. Basically, everything they did to him I can't mention in the video, nor do I want to. He was then found on a railway track 2 days later. This shocking incident deeply affected people worldwide, prompting widespread concern and condemnation. The two kids, despite their young age, were found guilty of this crime, and the case raised significant questions about the behavior of young individuals and what could have influenced their actions. It remains one of the most tragic and thought-provoking events in modern history, and it's easily one of the most disturbing things I've ever read. This sculpture is at the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao and has been named Maman. It's a 9-meter tall spider. It's been sculpted by an artist and she used all kinds of materials to make it. Spiders are apparently a recurring motif in the artist's work. The long, fragile-looking legs make a lot of people uncomfortable because it can almost feel like an organic cage that can trap you. Now, these statues at the St. George's Church in the Czech Republic look like a scene out of about 50 horror films that I know. This church was abandoned in the 1960s, after which Jacob Hadrava began to restore it, by placing these statues to represent the ghosts of the people who lived nearby before World War II and were at this church every Sunday. The Darvaza gas crater, also known as the Door to Hell or Gates of Hell, is a burning natural gas field collapsed into a cavern near Darvaza, Turkmenistan. It was accidentally created when a Soviet drilling rig punched into a massive underground natural gas deposit, causing the ground to collapse and swallowing the entire drilling rig. Having punctured a pocket of gas, poisonous fumes began leaking at an alarming rate. To head off a potential environmental catastrophe, the Soviets set the hole alight, figuring it would stop burning within a few weeks. Decades later, and the fiery pit is still going strong. The pit has a diameter of 60 to 70 meters, and a depth of only about 30 meters. Nagaro is a tiny Japanese village with one very eerie feature, a life-size doll population that actually outnumbers the humans there. The toy residents are the work of a local named Tsukimi Ayano, who began making doll replicas of her neighbors after they died or moved away. The eerie doppelgangers can be seen in various positions across the town. Fishermen sitting on the riverbank, students filling entire classrooms, and elderly couples resting on benches outside of buildings. There are now around 350 dolls and 27 humans in Nagaro, making it a somewhat terrifying toyland. Maybe one day there will be no one left in this town, with only the statues remaining. People have been placing crosses on this little hill in northern Lithuania since the 14th century. Throughout the medieval period, the crosses originally expressed a desire for Lithuanian independence. Then, after a peasant uprising in 1831, people began adding to the site in remembrance of dead rebels. The hill became a place of defiance once again during Soviet occupation from 1944 to 1991. Even though everything was bulldozed by the Soviets 3 times, locals kept rebuilding it. There are now more than 100,000 crosses crowded there, sometimes clashing together in the breeze, like an eerie wind chime. It really seems like a scene out of The Conjuring. This picture has really fascinated me since I've seen it. It's taken in August 1990 by 2 young chefs hiking in a remote area of the Scottish Highlands. The pair have remained anonymous, but are believed to have captured 6 photos of this mysterious aircraft before it allegedly accelerated away at an immense speed. After witnessing the unusual event, the 2 young guys handed the photos to a newspaper, but instead of publishing them, the Daily Record passed the images to the British Ministry of Defense, where they quickly disappeared. As is standard protocol, the Calvine file should have been released after 30 years in 2021, but British authorities withheld the original photo and the names of the witnesses until 2076, citing privacy concerns. However, British journalist David Clarke discovered that a former press officer of the Royal Air Force, Craig Lindsay, had secretly held onto a copy of one of the prints. Lindsay is now 83 years old and was the first official to speak with the authors of the photo. A senior lecturer of photography at Sheffield Hallam University said about the photo, "Sadly, I do not think that the mysterious aircraft arrived from another galaxy. I believe it was man-made, somewhere in a secret hangar, and whatever it was remains on the secret list and is highly sensitive." But he does not question the authenticity of the photo. What's unique about this is that we've had similar cases in the US where people reported seeing a UFO and then it turned out to be a military jet that was still in development that we saw a few years later. But I have still never seen any plane or flying object that looks anything like this, and the bizarre shape makes it so much more mysterious. By the way, I just want to say I do not believe that there are little green people in here or anything like that. I'm just saying it's interesting, because I still have not seen anyone doubt the authenticity of the photo, and no one really knows what the hell we're even looking at here. In 1997, following an anonymous tip, police entered a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, an exclusive suburb of San Diego, California, and discovered 39 victims of a mass unaliving. The deceased, 21 women and 18 men of varying ages, were all found lying peaceful in matching dark clothes and sneakers and had no noticeable signs of trauma. It was later revealed that the men and women were members of the Heaven's Gate religious cult. The cult was led by Marshall Applewhite, a music professor who, after surviving a near-death experience in 1972, was recruited into the cult by one of his nurses, Bonnie Lou Nettles. In 1975, Applewhite and Nettles persuaded a group of 20 people from Oregon to abandon their families and possessions and move to eastern Colorado, where they promised that an extraterrestrial spacecraft would take them to the kingdom of heaven. The two explained that human bodies were merely containers that could be abandoned in favor of a higher physical existence. As the spacecraft never arrived, membership in Heaven's Gate diminished. During the early 1990s, the cult resurfaced as Applewhite began recruiting new members. Soon after the 1995 discovery of the comet Hale-Bopp, the Heaven's Gate members became convinced that an alien spacecraft was on its way to Earth, hidden from human detection behind the comet. In October 1996, Applewhite rented a large home in Rancho Santa Fe, explaining to the owner that his group was made up of Christian-based angels. In 1997, as part of its 4,000-year orbit around the Sun, the comet passed near Earth in one of the most impressive astronomical events of the 20th century. In late March 1997, as it reached its closest distance to Earth, Applewhite and 38 of his followers consumed a lethal drink and then laid on the floor, hoping to leave their bodily containers, enter the alien spacecraft, and pass through Heaven's Gate into a higher existence. Insicam is a directory website that has lists of unsecured, different live IP surveillance CCTV cameras without a changed default password. I believe the website was started to show how easy it is to spy on people. By the way, even though these cameras are only in publicly accessible locations, people have the same cameras in their own homes for security purposes, and they can be accessed just as easily as these cameras. This website just chooses not to list them for privacy reasons.